60 harvests is what's remaining.
Yeah.
You know, that's probably true because we're depleting the soil from monocropping. Those store shelves have to be stocked daily by the trucks coming in, and if those trucks stop, it'll get wiped out.
We have probably the most efficient system in all world history. We're trading efficiency for a fragile system.
This out, 3 females and 1 male will produce 400 pounds of meat a year.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Full Stack Podcast. We have a great episode for you today. We are talking to founder of From the Farm, who is passionate about sustainable food systems. We're going to get deep into it during the podcast today. We have AJ Richards, which, Mike, we're excited for this conversation, man.
Absolutely. I've been tracking what AJ's been up to for a while, and I think everybody should know about it. So with that, AJ, I'm going to hit you with the first one here. You said that the average city has about a 3-day supply of food that can be put on the shelves. Can you walk us through the mechanics of the supply chain and what happens on day 4 if things were to break down?
Yeah. No matter where you live, the food you consume, if you're not buying it directly from the producer, comes from the store shelf. Store shelves are relying on semi-loads to come in on a regular basis to keep the store shelves stocked. Those semi-loads are relying on the mechanics of the food system of whichever they're hauling, whether it's produce or beef or dairy or whatever, that's all been processed and ready to go onto their trucks to get to the grocery stores. And then all of the downstream effects of, where the beef is coming from and processing facilities that are available, or where the dairy's coming from and who's milking them, like that's all tied in. And we saw a glimpse of this fragility of our system during COVID. We were still processing food, meat, and other things in some facilities, and yet the disruption was enough to limit and put restrictions on what you could buy or how much you could buy. And in some cases, if you even had it. So that's what we're talking about. 3 days, the amount of purchases and consumers. And of course, it depends on the city you're in as well. If you're in a massive city, those store shelves have to be stocked daily by the trucks coming in. And if those trucks stop, it'll get wiped out.
Yeah, I know New York City has, I think, less than like a 48-hour supply.
Yeah.
If anything stopped. And, when I doing a little bit of research for the show, I was reading about how we have probably the most efficient system in all world history, but we're trading efficiency for a very if you have high efficiencies, you probably have a lot of fragility. And what you've been working on is more of an anti-fragile system.
Right. And, the efficiencies come from a line item on a spreadsheet from a CEO looking at their margins. Like, how do we extract more from this particular revenue? What are the efficiency? What efficiencies can we implement to be able to extract more revenue? So that's kind of led the decision making up to this point, and it's left the stability of our food system floundering. I mean, there's a lot of metrics we can point to show that, but that's, efficiency is a focus. It seems to be a focus on revenue or profit, not stability.
I'm reading a book by Ray Dalio right now, Principles. Fantastic book. But one of the things that he talks about is, I think maybe during the 80s, he was in the commodities market really heavily. And he talks about how he was able to basically generate formulas and study everything from the grain production and how that was going to impact that was going to impact what meat ended up on the shelves and what was going to be in demand, and had really, he's attempted to make it a science, right? Mm-hmm. And he's probably gotten the closest anyone's ever gotten to making the food supply that way, down to a science. And it's allowed people like McDonald's. McDonald's was one of his his clients, and they were unable to do the chicken nuggets. The McNuggets was something that they wanted to do, but they couldn't find stable pricing of the chicken. And so he was able to, through math and making some deals, to create a more stable thing for McDonald's to be able to offer it, which is like, okay, this is like highly convenient, cheap food.
Yep.
And through economics, he's able to make it work. But what are the other costs that aren't economic to that?
Right. And then what are the downstream effects? Like you're so narrowly focused in one area, you maybe don't see the consequences downstream, right? It's like an easy example, depending on who your audience is, it's like cloud seeding, right? Weather modification. Well, if you're pulling moisture out of the atmosphere for one particular area, naturally, where was that moisture headed? Do you really know where that was actually eventually going to land? And now, because you pull it all out over this area through modification, what's that effect going to be, down the jet stream where it would have ended up naturally? But that's a complicated topic because we've broken so much of the, natural systems through efficiency already.
See, you're getting in my realm.
Yeah.
So that is your realm, Ted.
I'm a meteorologist by trade, AJ.
Nice.
So
Okay,
you're speaking my
good.
language.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, you gotta educate me some more too. That's great.
Yeah, we do have one of the world's leading experts on rain here.
Yeah, awesome.
How complex is meteorology? And what are the impacts of things like cloud seeding?
I mean, is that a question to me? I mean, it's
measured.
I mean, butterfly effect, right, AJ?
Yeah, that's exactly what the thought was in my head. It's the butterfly effect. It's like you tweak this here, but there's no way for anybody to fully wrap their head around what's going to happen on this side of the country. Like Utah, for example, is the largest investor by state in cloud seeding, in weather modification. Okay, so then what happens to Colorado next door? Or then what happens, if we're getting the moisture coming from, from California's area and it's supposed to move across, we already have the Rocky Mountains that affect that naturally, right? So the east slopes of the Rocky Mountains are typically drier because it throws, and you'd know this way better than I do, Ted, but it's going to throw that way up high and it isn't going to come down till it gets further out Midwest. Well, now Utah's saying, no, we're going to stop it right here. What's happened in the states next door to them and then the one after them? What are those effects? I don't know, and I don't know if they know or if they care. They're just getting paid for creating more water in Utah.
Yeah, what you're talking on, to expand on that, is upsloping winds goes up the mountainside, and as an air parcel moves higher up in the atmosphere, higher likelihood of the moisture in the atmosphere condensing into cloud cover, and that enhances the rainfall. So if you've ever seen the movie Holes and they're like, the rain never makes it over the mountains, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about upsloping winds squeezing the moisture out. So by the time it gets to the east side of the Rockies, there's not that much moisture left in the atmosphere. So to your point, AJ, if Utah is taking whatever's left of that moisture, there's not that much to go around even further. And like we said, the impacts and the repercussions is hard to measure.
Yeah. And then you add on top of that, what we were talking about is efficiencies in the food system. Well, efficiencies in the food system as the primary focus has led to the reduction in in livestock, not wildlife, but livestock, that essentially replaced wildlife, which was the bison. The bison was responsible for replenishing the organic matter in the soil as they moved across the open ranges, right? They moved in herds, they dropped their manure, that regrew grass. Grass has a process called evapotranspiration, which is basically the grass sweats, right? And so when the grass sweats, it creates some local moisture water cycles. Well, because of the process of efficiency, hey, let's put all these cows in confinement and let's move cows in from Mexico and Canada because it's more efficient as a corporation. I can make more money. we've now reduced the number of ruminating animals in our western lands and across our country, that now the soil isn't being fertilized, so we're not growing the grass volume we used to, and now we've broken the local water cycles on top of it, and all in the name of earlier decisions around efficiency, not knowing the butterfly effect, downstream consequences.
I think we've seen that a lot. We've seen, you know, it's very difficult for, especially for, say, a country that's democratic in nature, where it operates in 4-year cycles,
Yeah.
and can you really are you going to make long-term decisions that are going to impact the next generation?
Yeah.
And so one is, I don't think we have a system that's set up to do that. And then for two, I don't think human beings are really set up to think that far down the line. I think the Chinese have done a really good job of that historically. I don't know if that's what's happening there currently, but and then there's we just don't know. Like,
Yeah.
we're doing new things all the time, and we see in economics too. We don't know what the impact of this is going to be.
Yeah.
So I've read this many times in many places, that there's only so many more cycles of soil left. And so the soil has been depleted of certain minerals. I know boron is a mineral that tends to go first. So if we look at the soil that's been a lot of monocultural farming, that is, they've been growing just one thing. Corn or soy are the most popular. I drive cross country at least once a year, and my wife and I are always blown away at how much soy there is. It seems like there's just more and more soy every time I cross country, and I've been driving across at least once a year, sometimes more, for 25 years. How many cycles are really left? Because we're looking at one thing is calories, but then so the macronutrient, like, we're able to produce a lot of calories, but are we able to produce a lot of micronutrients if the soil is devoid of that? And at some point, is it just going to be hard for anything to grow, and do things turn into a desert? And what kind of timeline are we looking at for that?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that said quite a bit too. 60 harvests is what's remaining.
Yeah.
That, I think that number I first heard probably in 2021 or 22. And the challenge is, I mean, one thing is, yeah, that's probably true, because we're depleting the soil from monocropping, and we a lot of agriculture today was taught in land grant universities. Land grant universities are funded by chemical corporations like Bayer and Monsanto. So just like in the medical field, when we kind of all became aware the last 6 years that, our doctors were educated by pharma, not by what actually makes us healthy. So that's why they're treating the symptom, not the cause, because that's what they were taught. It's the same in agriculture. If you went to a land grant university, your education curriculum was built on the funding of ChemChina, Bayer, Monsanto. And so that's the practice is being done. You go back 2 generations, great grandpa wasn't vaccinating his livestock. Great grandpa wasn't using, chemical inputs on his operation. He was using nature in working with itself, multi-species. He had pigs, he had chickens, he had livestock, and they were working in harmony because that's what provided the result. Then some guy in a lab coat showed up and sprinkled some magic fairy dust, and he got, double the volume of crop growth, and was like, wow, it's a miracle, but had no context to what was being sold to him or the long-term consequences. And so yeah, we've got this system that is designed for maximum efficiency, for maximum revenue. They can turn the crop, but there's no long-term look at what that's doing to us. And now our soils are depleted. I've seen data from meat tested, from conventional, which means, they had the cow calf was born on some open range, and at 600 pounds or so, they sold it to a feedlot. And that feedlot most often is in Nebraska somewhere, where all that corn is being grown for feed. And then it goes into, gets finished out, goes and gets processed into meat. So this report I saw compared conventionally grown meat with grass-fed meat. And then the third nuance, or the third sample, was regenerative meat. So, because there's a difference, and we can maybe go into that, but the regenerative side is looking at the cow as a tool, not just the end resource, which is protein. The tool view is, how do I work with this animal to replenish the soil, the nutritional value in the soil, because then that feeds the nutritional value of the vegetation that that animal's eating, that then puts the nutritional value into the protein that comes from that animal, that then goes into our bodies. And the data was very compelling. I mean, the difference between regenerative and conventional was 65% higher essential and non-essential amino acids, 70 something percent increase in phytonutrients, and the omega-3 to 6 ratios were perfect. It was like 1 to 3. And that's because that animal is foraging on highly nutritional dense forage that is good for that animal. And it all starts at the soil. So yeah, if we keep depleting it versus regenerating it, and its nutritional value, we're not going to have that. And so as far as like the 60 harvests, the problem is that was attached to this globalist agenda of cows are a problem for the environment. And this control, and I believe a control on our food. You control the food, you control the people, because there's the data or the knowledge around cows being a problem for the environment is just completely false. There was no truth to that whatsoever. It's not the cow, it's the how. When you're importing, hundreds of millions of pounds of beef from Brazil and shipping them across the ocean on a super tanker that contributes this, the equivalent of 40,000 vehicles on the highway, but we're importing all this meat. The cow didn't cause the problem. The cow had nothing to do with the problem. In fact, it probably did great for the country. It was probably doing a great service for the ecology of the country it came from, of course, depending on how it was raised, but how the efficiency focused it on maximizing revenue for the corporation. That's the impact of the cow. So that's where it got kind of thrown off, is all these people, concerned about the environment said, yeah, the cow's the problem. Methane's a problem. Let's get Bill Gates to create some vaccine that makes cows fart less. Like, come on, man. None of that was rooted in value or truth.
I'm hearing. Go ahead, Mike.
I was having dinner with the fam a while back, and I was being really nitpicky about the meat that was on the menu at the house. And I'm like, I don't really normally eat this, and my wife's looking at me like, oh God, here he goes again. She's learned to embrace the fact that we're going to be the weird ones when I go see my family or her family. And then of course somebody speaks up and says, well, why not? And I go, well, the meat that's right here was almost dead. It was almost dead when they slaughtered it, and it's diseased and all this. And the meat that I eat, it was really healthy when it was slaughtered. So I'm eating like really good fresh meat. This is like diseased meat right here. Yeah. And like people are like putting their forks down and going, oh God. And Ashley's going, oh my gosh, you just ruined everybody's dinner.
Oh, that's
I love this. Actually, this is what I was most excited for when doing the research for this, AJ, and it was the conditions in which cattle is slaughtered and the hormones released within the cattle that can get locked into the meat that we then consume. So pretty much, are we consuming the residual trauma of the animals that are being slaughtered? I'd love for you to touch on that process. We've talked about the depletion of nutrients in the soil, but like Mike just mentioned, even if we're getting our meats and we're stocking up past 3 days in the freezer, is the meat we're eating tainted?
Yeah. I can speak to what I can speak to is, yes, it is. What I can't speak to is the exact consequences of high cortisol levels in the animals when they're being slaughtered, right? But there is a lot of energy and effort that has been focused around humane handling, is what they call it. So I ran a small USDA slaughterhouse here in Cody, Wyoming. That's how we ended up here. And before I got here, I'd seen on-farm slaughter. I mean, I've seen many different processes of processing an animal. And there's a lot of effort to prevent the hormone spike, the cortisol and stress factor of an animal going through process, because yes, it will taint the meat. Now, the consequences it has on us from that aspect of it, that I'm not familiar with. But there's a woman named Temple Grandin. There's actually a documentary about her. She's an autistic woman that kind of, because of her autism, feels what animals feel. And so she has designed what they call kill chutes. That's where you walk the animal up before you dispatch it, entirely around the way that the animal moves naturally, specifically for the purpose of reducing the stress level of that animal at harvest. And so they're round pens. There's no like hard corners because cattle don't travel that way. So there's a lot of effort put there. Also, when animals are delivered, they typically spend a day in those holding pens, calming down from the truck ride, because there's a lot of stress going on. You load them up in the trailer. Now you're hauling them down the highway. This is not a natural environment for them. So they're already stressed out by the time they get to the processing facility. And so a lot of times they'll hold them for a day or two before they process them, so they can kind of get used to their surroundings, get familiar with the noises, and then they do the processing. So yeah, there's a lot of effort put into reducing that. I met some folks that had created lights that go inside of semi trailers. I don't know if they're in production, if they were able to pull it off, but it's called Zions lights. And they can program the frequency of the light to go into, because it goes through the eyes of the animal. And then I don't know if their DNA or their makeup is the same as ours, but the hypothalamus, right, in our own brains, and Mike probably knows a ton about this, but through different wavelengths of light. So they designed these lights to be in feedlots and in semi trucks as they're being hauled, so that it's actually releasing the hormone for them. I'll use melatonin because I don't know what their hormone is, but it's releasing a calming hormone for them through these lights so that they're not stressed, because there's plenty of knowledge that people in this cattle space have, that stress does change, it changes the flavor profile, and what are the downstream consequences of the cortisol that we're consuming, which that part I don't know. So yeah, there's a lot of knowledge around that.
Can you walk us through the typical conventional path of the calf is born to being on your plate, and what it's like to have regenerative?
Yeah, so on the conventional side, you'll have typically in the West, where the cow calf, they call them cow calf operations, where mama cow, baby cow. So the ranchers raise the mama cows, take care of them, and then they breed them every year, and then they have the baby. And then in the West, we don't have a whole lot of forage, not a whole lot of grass, because we don't have a whole lot of rain, right? And so they can't really finish out, in other words, get them from calf to fat just on range ground in the West. Now, you can, but not the volume being moved through America, right, to feed America. You're not doing that in the West. And so they'll sell those at auction at a certain weight, 400 pounds to 600 pounds, kind of varies. And then those animals get bought at auction by a company or family, depends on who's buying them, that has a small feedlot, or their backgrounders. And then they'll take them as that 600-pound calf to their feedlot, and then they start feeding them rations. And those rations are very scientifically calculated to put a certain amount of weight every day on that animal, right? So they're getting a certain amount of feed because they know that this feed ration is going to give this cow a 2-pound gain per day. And those feed rations, a lot of them are corn and grain and other things to fatten them up. And so then they'll sit in that feedlot for however many days, depending on the operation, right? Some of the bigger operations, they're in the feedlots for 12 months, depending on what their finishing goals are. Yeah.
Have you ever driven by any of these, Ted? Have you seen these?
No, I have not.
Oh yeah. If you drive, I know that I see a lot of them when I drive through like New Mexico, Arizona, or the Midwest.
Yeah.
as well. I see a lot of them.
Yep.
It's that place that is all dirt and smells terrible.
Yep. Yeah, and if you're in Greeley, Colorado, they say that smells like money because that's where all the big slaughterhouses are. Now, I should be clear. 12 months may be a little long for how long they're there, but they're there 120 days plus, depending on when they acquired that animal and what that particular operation is set up to do. I know I have friends that raise cattle, and their cows are in feedlots their whole lives. Now, they're smaller feedlots, and I would call it maybe like a boutique operation, if I could use that word in a rugged way. But those, it's like we have this very specific genetics. Maybe it's Wagyu, and so we're babying this thing, and it's in this stall. It can move around, but it's in this stall, and we're just giving it the exact feed ration because we're creating this very specific result for this quality of beef that's going to be sold at $100 an ounce at a restaurant, right? So you have that side of it too. Now, regenerative, the difference on
Well,
the regenerative,
the one thing I understand too is when they get on the feedlot, say they're there for 6 months, so they show up at one weight, and we got to get them to this weight to maximize profit. That's when the steroids and antibiotics come in, because they're fattening them up so quickly that they're going to get sick, and then that's where the antibiotics and steroids come in handy.
Yes,
and so that's why, from what I understand, that's why it's hard to get a cheap. You can't get a cheap piece of meat that isn't full of steroids and antibiotics.
That's right. That's right. They put a lot of them have pellets they'll put behind their ears. It's testosterone, it's hormones, so that they gain weight faster, because it's all about maximizing efficiency to revenue. I mean, they're trying to get the conventional system is trying to get a breed of cow that is finished in 14 months. Like that's to the efficiency conversation again. They keep trying to get faster at fattening these animals to plate because that's less time, less inputs, which means less money. And so, how do we get to that point where you're eating veal at that point, right? And like Mike said at his family gathering, if you're fat, if the path to getting them to gain weight is to just put as much weight and fat on them as possible, which is corn and grain, it's like a human being that eats only carbs. They're metabolically unhealthy, and so that is what's happening. And so and a lot of times, there are rules and regulations about being able to sell meat with any traces of antibiotics, but I don't trust the process and the people in charge to actually be telling the truth whether or not those are completely out of their system. I've read counter reports that say no, there are trace elements and they're causing hormonal disruption, especially for our young women, because of antibiotics or testosterone that's in certain quantities within the meat they're consuming. So yeah, I'm glad you stopped us on that because that's important. That's a big part of that. A lot of ranchers, depending on where they're selling, won't put they've gone away from the hormones. They know consumers want no hormone or antibiotic beef. And so they've gone away from putting the pellets in. The challenge though, is this is where I bring it back to the consumers. They're bucking the system that everybody's educated on. So unless the consumers become educated and show up for them, you leave them hanging and they either have to go back to what they were doing to sell into the commodity market or they go bust. So consumers are as responsible for keeping our food system healthy and pure as much as the producers raising it. And so, yeah, that's kind of what that. So once the animal's ready, and this is what we saw during COVID to finish out that pipeline, one slaughterhouse, like they just closed the Tyson plant in Nebraska. It processed 5,000 head of cattle per day. So what happened during COVID is people were sick or they weren't allowed to go to work, during those first few weeks. So you had these massive facilities with, thousands of employees that were processing 6,000 head of cows a day. And now nobody's shown up to work for a week at a time. So now, in order to process 6,000 head of cows in this one facility today, that means they had 6,000 ready to go tomorrow. So they're still standing on all fours in the feedlot, ready, waiting for their turn. And that means another 6,000 for the next day, and so on, right? Which that goes all the way down the supply chain. Ranchers, cow calf ranchers know I need to birth my calves in April, March and April, which in some places is blizzarding, but I need to birth them in this time so that they're 600 pounds by August, right? So the whole system, birth to end, is been dictated by the buyers, which are the big meat companies, and what they have built. And it's been going on for so long. In fact, a couple of years ago, we had such a bad winter in Wyoming, a late winter, which we might have this year because it's still 40 degrees outside. They lost 20% of the calf crop because of they froze. No mammal in nature is birthing their offspring in April, unless they live in a climate where that makes sense. Definitely not in the Rocky Mountain West. It's still frozen. They're not having babies at that time. They'd be wiped out. so you've got all these animals ready to go. Nobody shows up for work. Now they can't process them. And that's where our food system, the wheels really came off. So we were processing beef, selling it locally in Utah. We called our local processor to get our next round of cows processed for our customers. And literally within 1 week, we went from them saying, yeah, cool. How many you got? 5? Okay, cool. Bring them next week. Great. When that hit, we called 1 week later and they're like, we can get you in a year and a half. Because now an animal on 4 legs is much more expensive to hold on to than beef sitting in the freezer. Like we can rent cold storage space and fill that up and hold on to it and sell through it, but we can't keep feeding this thing. It's costing us money. And so the wheels just fell off. So now in my local community, I can't even feed my customers because all these guys were like, oh shit, we got nowhere to send these animals. We need to put them into the slaughterhouse, the local slaughterhouse. They just got hammered. And so it became real bad. So that's the conventional sort of, rough conventional supply chain.
Really quick with the conventional side of things, you mentioned the environments in April giving birth. How are those environments when it comes to like sicknesses and viruses as well?
Yeah.
A lot of folks might think of the bird flu that kind of ran its course. How are those environments? How do they kind of mitigate those impacts?
Well, I'd say that's where the vaccinations come in for calves. Most likely, I was watching this video with this old timer who's like, we never did vaccines when I was younger. Like that, we just didn't do it. It wasn't this thing. Now, I don't know if he's talking like pre-efficiency models that forced them to start, birthing calves in the dead of winter. I would imagine when the environment, cows are part of nature. They came from nature. They came from Spain. That's how they got to America. They were living just fine on their own without human intervention, but they didn't calve until, it was warm. And so, yeah, it's just like us. Cold weather kicks in. If you're not healthy, you're probably going to get a cold and you're going to need to take care of that. But if you got a strong immune system and a good environment, the weather can change and you're not going to deal with it. So, yeah, I think I would say a big part of why we have vaccine protocols for calves is to prevent pneumonia. That's what it's for. It's to prevent pneumonia. Well, that's going to be more likely in the dead of winter. And so, yeah, that's a hard subject for people because it's been sold just like pharmaceuticals so heavily that a lot of the guys doing this feel like that's necessary. I will tell you this from my personal experience, because I'm the same way. I'm going to buy animals that have no hormones, no antibiotics. I'm less concerned about that first pneumonia vaccine by the time the animal's finished. That's just me personally. Others may disagree with that. Totally fine. But I had some cows when we first moved here to Cody, and I used to give my cousin crap for vaccinating his cows. Then I had one of mine get sick. Hey, cuz, what's this vaccine I got to give this thing? Because that animal's under my care. I'm not going to just let it suffer and choke to death because it's got pneumonia. And so got the antibiotic that they all use and took care of it, and it got better. And and then it was a healthy cow. Now, in those operations, if you buy no hormones, no antibiotics beef, a lot of the ranchers, when you buy direct, if you're buying that from them, they really care about that because it's their personal label on the package of meat you're buying. And so what they'll do is if they have to give an animal antibiotics, they will remove it from the rest of the herd, and they won't sell it to somebody looking for no antibiotic beef. Now they'll wait till they have to test it, and they'll wait till there's no remnants in the test they provide before they sell it. But they'll sell it to somebody who's less concerned about that. Which there are many Americans who are still scratching the surface. They're not as far down the rabbit hole as the three of us are when it comes to knowing the value of our food.
Nice. So what about the regenerative?
Yeah.
Can you walk us through that?
Yep. So the regenerative side, like I mentioned a little bit, is focused on how the natural process of livestock in our environment and what, essentially how God intended them to interact for us and for the environment we're on. And so the regenerative side, to simplify it, it's basically managing your livestock as the wild bison herds did naturally, which means they were in solid, not confined, but solid tight bunches because of predators. So bears, wolves, coyotes, all the natural predators kept them bunched together, just like you see in African safari videos when they're all moving and the predators are putting pressure from the outside. They all stayed together and they always were on the move because of the constant predator push. So regenerative is the livestock, the person providing the husbandry for the animal, looking at it from that perspective and saying, okay, we've gotten rid of the predators, and so they're not going to have any natural push. So I'm the predator. How would these animals behave if they had the predator push? I'm going to play that role. And the good news is that cow is way better off not being stressed by wolves tearing their rear ends out while they're standing there alive, because that's what happens. They've just got Farmer John, dropping an electric fence and moving them to the next paddock. So what they'll do is they'll create paddocks or sections throughout their operation, usually with electric fence. Now there's new technology that my friends are using, which is basically like a shock collar for your dog, like a hidden fence. They now put those on cows. My buddy can take his phone, open up the app, and move his cows from his phone because it creates a sensation that moves them to the next section, no fencing required. And so now they're moving them in large herds. So what they're doing is they're blanketing the soil with their manure and trampling it in. The other thing that they'll avoid on many regenerative operations is deworming, ivermectin. Deworming is necessary when you're standing on a mountain of shit. But when you're out in the natural environment, it's less necessary. I'm not saying it's not necessary, but it's less necessary, and there are natural things you can do. But when you deworm a cow and it craps on the ground, that dewormer is in the manure. And what that does is it kills off the beneficial insects that nature has designed, like dung beetles, to drill that manure into the soil so it creates that soil biology. And the animals trampling on their own manure kind of starts pushing it in there. Their hooves are spayed like a little spade. And so when they step down, that creates a pocket for the organic matter and for rain to kind of sit and soak in when it's there. So they'll move them around in larger quantities so that it mimics that bison herd. They won't put ivermectin in many of these operations so that the beneficial insects can do their job, which is push it into the soil. The operations that have chickens will move chickens behind the cows after a day or two, because now the larvae from those beneficial insects have started growing. Chickens will go and scratch through the manure, eat the larvae, but that scratching is them moving more of that organic matter into the soil. So that's kind of what that operation looks like. Some of those guys are still only finishing calves, right? They may not live in an area, or they may not have enough ground to take that animal all the way to finishing. But I've also met a lot of guys that didn't have enough grass to finish those animals that were regenerative in the beginning. But after 5 years, they're growing so much more forage because they've fed the soil that they can actually start finishing their livestock on the ground that they had because they've increased all that forage. And then it goes, from there, it pretty much goes to the same pipeline. Somebody might background them. And backgrounding. I have a friend here, Cad's Beef. They buy the yearlings from somebody, and they have pivots, which is what you grow hay on. And instead of just focusing on hay, they grow a diversity of forage. They put all those cows on those pivots, and they rotate them close together on the pivots. And then they take them to their next, pivot and do the same thing. And then they finish them out completely on forage. They don't have enough ground to have cow calf, right? That requires, depending on your size, could require tens of thousands of acres. They might just have a couple of 100 acres of forage to finish them on, but they can then do that.
Nice.
Yeah.
I think so. You can basically use common sense to go, one of these is going to be more nutritious than the others. And I know that, some of the stuff I see online, I just saw a post the other day, but that I'll talk about. But people talk about, we don't have, where's the evidence for this being that much better than the other? But if you go, hey, look, if these two things cost the same or it was the same exact amount of effort, who is going to choose? Which one are you going to choose?
Yeah.
And it's incredibly obvious, right?
Yeah.
But the people who are arguing like it's not that big of a deal, or they're a nutrition coach. One of the guys that I advise, he's one of these where like he was posting like, yeah, just get some like grilled chicken at Chick-fil-A. It's okay, and that's true for the mom who's like, if you're gonna choose between this and that, and you're busy and you got a bunch of kids and a job and like you're trying to make it work, and that's going to be the healthier option. So there's like, I don't think there's like a moral thing or like necessarily like, I don't want people to feel like shame about not eating a certain way or whatever. Like wherever you're at, like just try to do a little bit better, right? Like that's all you really got to do. But for those of us who are looking to optimize, like I already eat really well. I already, my macronutrient profile is dialed in. I train. I'm this and that. I want to do that. I want the really healthy thing. And I'm willing to spend double because that's what I'm paying.
Mm-hmm.
I'm paying double for my meat. If I go to H-E-B and look at the conventional stuff, it's $8 a pound.
Yep.
But I go to the farmer's market and I go straight to the rancher, $13.50 a pound for ground.
Yep.
Like if you would have told me that 20 years ago, I'd be spending that much on ground beef. I'd be like, what the?
Some expensive tacos.
I don't even think. And then when I hunt, because I hunt a lot, it's. I remember I had a year where I just made a lot of kills, and my freezer was stacked, and I'd say more than 80% of the meat that was on our plate for that year was from wild game. And the energy I felt when I could feel the difference, like, wow, like a couple months of eating just wild game, my wife and I were going, man, I feel very vital. And then we went back to eating some more, even though it's grass fed and regenerative, there's even a difference there.
Yeah.
Between a wild game and something that was even regenerative farm. These are different things. So I just want to point that out. I don't think there's like if you're someone who's just trying to get off of Coca-Colas and Big Macs, get the conventional grilled chicken,
Yep.
And if you want to go the extra layer, like the people listening to this show aren't trying to just get by.
Right.
We're maximizing, we're optimizing. We want to live that full stack life.
Yeah, well, and so to that point, we used to spend 30% of our budget on food and 8% on healthcare. This was pre-efficiency eras, right? This was
You're talking about America.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and so this is pre-efficiency era. This is mom and pop raising it, and you're getting it from a local butcher shop or whatever, and you're paying for that because guess what? It costs that to do it the right way, right? Void of the efficiency model. This is what it takes. It's a lot of work. It takes a it takes to grow a healthy cow regeneratively, you're talking 24 months, which is double, 6 months longer than what they're trying to get it down to now at the conventional level. And so you're talking about a group of folks in your circle that understands I'm investing in my body, my health, because this is the thing that's supposed to get me from 0 to hopefully 85, 90 years old and not in a vegetative state.
170.
There you go.
Going to 170.
Nice. Bro. All right. 170.
Do it.
I believe in all the holistic living principles plus the technology and biohacking that's coming.
Right.
170 is a choice at this point, is the way I see it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So that's what people get. In this circle, we need more people to understand that, because if we want access to this quality of food, people need to have the knowledge to know that that's what it costs for the farmer or rancher to produce that quality of food, because they're not taking the shortcuts. And so that's what it takes. Then the other side too, when you talk about supplementation, imagine the amount of money people are spending on supplements monthly. Imagine the impact that will have if you're stacking supplements on all of the microorganisms and micro nutritional needs that you have that's coming from your food. In the old CrossFit days, it was just, you can't outwork a bad diet. That was such a simple term. What we're talking about is you can't out supplement a shitty diet. Like you're gonna eat Chick-fil-A, but then you're gonna stack all these supplements because you're trying to be healthy. You're missing it. Imagine how much more efficient those supplements would be for you if you were putting that on top of the high quality, nutrient dense food that you can get. And but then it requires prioritization. Like, where are you spending?
There's a 28-year-old fitness coach out there that's going to argue with you.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
Because I'm 44.
Yeah.
You start noticing the nuance.
Yeah.
If you're paying attention.
Yeah.
Most 44-year-olds aren't.
Yeah.
But for those of us who are paying attention, the nuance and the nutrition becomes extremely loud.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, okay, there is a difference here.
Yep. I mean, I had the luxury of growing up with some old school grandparents that were never city people. And so what I mean by that is I got the advantage to see their lifestyle, which was far closer to, what our lifestyles were when we were doing things naturally. Now, I'm not saying that, a lot of people were hungry or you didn't know what you were going to eat. So we've got some modern technologies that make that kind of stuff better. But my grandparents pretty much didn't eat anything that they didn't grow. I mean, and they lived happy, healthy. Like, Grandpa got bucked off his horse at 93. Now, your bones don't recover like they used to. So he died a few short years later because he just didn't recover. But he was mounting a horse at 93 years old and moving cattle. That's the life I want, right? And it was his inputs and his lifestyle. He was never sedentary. He only ate what he grew or what came from somebody. He knew how it was grown. And so that's the kind of life that I want to live, and the kind of life I'm trying to help others live that are in tune with that way of being.
Yeah, I think there's something worth mentioning. I studied a lot of economics, is supply and demand. And one of the things that happens in everything, rewind 100 years ago, no one had air conditioning.
Yep.
And when air conditioning came along, who got it first? The wealthy.
Yeah.
They can spend the money on it. Same thing with flat screen TVs. Whatever it is the people that every new technology or every new or anything that's high end at some point becomes mainstream. And that's because people that have money and are willing to invest in that see the value in it. They spend the money on it, and that then allows the supply to go up. And so right now, my $13.50 ground beef could technically be cheaper. I tell people a lot of times is, they go, I can't believe you spend that much money on the food. And I tell them that the food, I have to spend more on it than it's actually, quote unquote worth, because their food is artificially cheap. Yeah. It's been subsidized. The corn and soy and the things that are feeding this cattle have been subsidized. So technically, the taxes that are being paid are actually making your food cheaper.
Yep.
And then if I want to choose something differently, then I'm going to have to just spend more. But if there's enough of us that say, you know what, screw it, I'm going to spend more no matter what. And when enough people do that, the prices do come down because now more farmers do it. And when you get more supply that to meet the demand, the price comes down. And so, you know, there's this idea that something like that is fixed, and it's like it's not fixed. To your point is, if enough people become educated, and not just educated, but actually value it, and having value does come from education, because once you understand the difference between conventional and regenerative, and every time you're standing there going, I'm about to buy some groceries, you have to make a value judgment of, what do I value more, this or this?
Yep.
Do I value my Netflix subscription, or do I value having high quality food?
Yeah.
And because, you know, these are the choices that people are having to make. And 8% of the US population are millionaires.
Yeah.
8% of the US population. If every person who is a millionaire in the US started eating like this, guaranteed the price of these things would go down, and the funding that would be available for more people to do regenerative farming would be present.
Yeah. Yeah. It only takes 8 to 10%, about 10% of the population to create change, to really shift. I mean, I think I read somewhere that was it the Revolutionary War? It was only like 10% of the population that wanted to fight the crown. And we're a free country because 10% said, we ain't playing that game. You know what I mean? And so it doesn't take a whole lot. But to your point, and this is the right group to talk about this with, behavioral change science. We've become so removed from our food system that in order to get people to go back, you can't just like this whole conversation we had is not a great conversation for the layman that's just trying to figure it out. It's way too in depth, and it's overwhelming. So like at my house,
this show's not for the layman.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But in
maybe
my
one
house,
day we'll break into the mainstream market.
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah, you don't want to go there. But like in our house,
that means I fell asleep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wake up.
Yeah. You know, like we're probably to about 80% of our food is sourced from the person we know. I mean, Cody can't do that with produce in the winter. Like it's just not happening here. So, but the majority of it is, and we do when we can, when the farmers markets are going, that's where we get our food. The reason I bring that up is if you are trying to figure this out and you go into my pantry, you're going to be like, oh, hell no, that's too much. So I try to teach people that are just getting started. Behavioral change science is picking one thing until it becomes a natural behavior and working on that until that's easy. Treat your food, treat the transition of the food you're buying in the same sense. Because the system, I mean, we're trying to fix this from the farm, but the system doesn't make it easy to buy locally, to get to know your farmer and rancher. That's not that easy. I mean, you can Google it, but then you're wondering, are these legit? Do I really know if they're legit? Are they actually selling me what I'm getting? And so what I tell people is pick one thing in your pantry or in your refrigerator that you want to commit to changing, that's all you're going to do. And do that until that becomes easy. So if it's beef, start with beef, because at some point what's going to happen is you're going to find somebody to buy beef from, and then they're going to run out or not be available, and you're going to have to learn how to overcome that, right? So you start with the beef. There was a change. Oh, I got to try somebody else or find somebody else. But once you've done that, where you're like, oh, cool. If my beef guy drops off, I know exactly how to find more. I'm not even worried about that. Now that's a natural behavior. You've already got it. Then pick the next item. You know, like for us, I think we did raw dairy. So beef was always something. That's how I grew up. As soon as I was in a place where raw dairy was easy to find and accessible, that's all we buy now. So then we went from beef. Now we have beef and raw dairy in our refrigerator or freezer. And then we added grain. Now we buy grain right from the source. We know how it's raised. We buy grain berries. We mill our own grain to make our bread. But if you would have said, hey, Ted, if I'm your coach, I'm like, hey, we're going to get you beef. We're going to get you dairy. You're going to be like, whoa. I don't know that I can do all of this. I've never I'm still buying from the grocery store. So behavioral change science says just pick one thing, do it until it becomes a consistent behavior, and then add the next thing. That's how we can really get people to start making those shifts, because then they're also going to see the physical benefits of just implementing that one new item. And frankly, you can see the financial benefits if you buy beef in shares. You buy a whole cow and fill a freezer. You're going to pay far less buying a whole cow. You do have to pay up front. Hey, folks, tax season's coming around. I can think of no better place for you to put a tax return than buying a whole beef and filling that freezer so you know you've got it.
Dude, I had a client gift me half a cow.
Dang.
A coaching client. He was like, I had a coaching client.
Yeah.
And he's like, you want a cow? I cows. Yeah, bro.
Awesome.
I was like, how are you? He finished it and everything. He's got land. I was like, I started drilling him on like what he does. I was like, okay, you get it. All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Nice.
Yeah. Are you familiar with, I imagine it might be a small industry with TJ Vizio Day? He started a company, actually centralized real estate, but one thing he's been pushing and trying to break into the market was ranchising. This idea that you can buy the ranch and have ranch handlers work it for you. And in essence, you own 80% of the yield. The ranch hands get 20%. And that's a way for folks. I'm thinking specifically to the audience that finds themselves in a metropolitan area. Maybe they're in Chicago, New York, and they're like, bro, I got to drive, 30, 40 miles in 2 hours to find enough land to find the farmers. But that was a model that he injected or was trying to inject in order to make it more accessible for people to really learn more about this stuff. Is that something you're familiar with? It sounds like you are.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I've been following Axe for a long time. I think what they're doing is awesome. I don't know what their success looks like currently, but if they could pull something like that off, I mean, one of the biggest movements during COVID was people realizing we need to get the heck out of the city, get into the country, and grow and produce our own food. So homesteading was the fastest growing movement in the last administration's 4 years. People were just like, how do I do this? So I think what he put together is pretty brilliant. I've met a couple of other folks working on that, but we used to do ranching in community, although it was a small community. In other words, you had 10 kids. So you had lots of people to help you do the work that needed done to actually produce your food and the food for your neighbors, right? Most people aren't having 10 kids anymore. So the next best is finding people you align with and moving into a community like that, where it's like, okay, I've seen bigger families buy land and just go and each build their own house there. And one person's in charge of the chickens. The other one's in charge of milking the cow. The other one's raising the beef. The other one's doing the lambs. It's a lot of work. And so you need a lot of hands. And it's either children or a community that you can count on to pull their weight. Yeah.
Here at Full Stack, we talk a lot about sovereignty, and there's a big mindset that comes with sovereignty. And one of the things that I've noticed for myself as I've taken logistical steps for my sovereignty. Sovereignty at one level is like psycho-emotional and how I see myself in the world, and having my own authority as I show up in the world and I lead myself, and I'm really an adult.
Yeah.
I kind of see being an adult and being sovereign as synonymous, and which means there's not many adults running around, but
right.
There's these different steps that we can take logistically, and one of these is exactly what you're talking about. You've turned your food system for you personally, and what you're working on to provide for everybody else is to provide sovereignty for the food system.
Yep.
And there's something I've noticed that when I make a change in my environment and how a system works, and I gain more sovereignty, I actually get a mental upgrade. I actually experience it in my whole nervous system upgrades, and I start viewing the world differently. And my experience of other people, that maybe some people I used to, hold them, put them on a pedestal, or, view them as like maybe they're a little scary, or certain situations are a little scary. And then I find some level of sovereignty in my life, internally and externally. And sometimes one shifts the other, and it's been difficult for me to predict what that's going to look like. What is it? What does it mean for somebody who says, you know what, I'm going to take sovereignty over my food. I'm going to participate in a decentralized food system, like
Yep.
what you're creating. I want to hear about what you're creating.
Yep.
And what does that do for somebody, and what does it do for their family?
Yeah, that's a really great question. There's a distinction between food security and food sovereignty. Food security is simply just having something to eat and put in your belly. MREs are food security. Doesn't mean they're good for you, right? Fake lab grown meat is food security, because if I'm not going to starve to death, I may be chronically ill down the road if I eat too much of this. But in this window of time when I need to put something in my stomach, lab grown meat is food security. But food sovereignty is your right or your ability to choose what you want to eat or how you want to source it, right? So there's a big difference between food security and food sovereignty.
This is incredibly fascinating to me right now. I just landed, and that if you look at the role of like any type of government throughout all of history, the number one reason any system, any type of government system gets set up is to create security.
Mm-hmm.
Like the entire role is like, those guys out over on that side, they want to rape and pillage you. You know what? Give us 10, 20%. We'll set up security and we'll ensure. And then if there's some disputes internally, we'll help you guys work that out, and that is at the core, the whole point of government. That's
Yep.
why people value it. Now, it does tend to creep and get into weird other things, but when you get down to like the nuts and bolts, that's the origin of government, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at what people want from government over time, it's always more security.
Yep.
In some way,
Yeah.
whatever like they're imagining they want to be provided for them is coming from fear. No one goes to the government and asks for something that isn't fear based in some way.
Yep.
And so the fact that the government is so intertwined, and people want the government to be so intertwined in the food system, and now you're talking about food security versus food sovereignty, is the thing about the word sovereignty is it's by its nature, no one could ever give it to you.
That's right.
It has to be self-realized.
Yep.
Sovereignty is not something that I can gift anybody.
I feel like the less sovereignty, in order to get more security, you have to give up sovereignty. Like there's a trade-off for that security, much like privacy, more privacy, less.
I would say nay. I would say that if you want to outsource the security, true. But
True.
Ultimate security comes from sovereignty. Ultimate security. The security that everyone wants to experience comes from sovereignty, but there's somebody on the outside saying, I'll give you what you're looking for. And they've lived their entire lives looking to an external authority to make them feel safe, and it's never happened.
Yeah.
The illusion of security.
Who walks around feeling ultimately secure? The only people I know that are ultimately secure, and these are very peaceful people, by the way. These are people that are just like Zen monks. The only people that have that, they own their own inner security, and it's created for them through themselves, not because whatever. And so like the whole like I've thought about this whole trade-off thing. It's just a fucking lie.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an illusion.
Yeah. Touche.
Yeah. It's like it is better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. I mean, the peace you'll have as a warrior in a garden versus being a gardener that's all of a sudden like, oh shit, bullets are flying. Like they didn't create their own sovereignty. And we just like you were talking about, like you want more safety. We're going to sell you that safety comes from security that we can provide you, but we need to have access to all of your private data. That's how we're going to keep you secure. We're going to monitor you. We're going to do all of those things. And yet the ones who, and I think it's tied to comfort and convenience, right? Because the ones who have avoided comfort and convenience, in my experience, seem to have the understanding of the value of sovereignty. I'm going to work for it myself. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to do the things that are uncomfortable, the things that nobody else wants to. And guess what? I feel really secure because I can handle whatever comes my way. If you've been pursuing comfort and convenience, you've given up your sovereignty. And so now you rely on somebody else to provide it for you. It's like when we raise our own meat chickens, the amount of, like you said, the state change that we had after that first year of processing our own meat birds when we knew nothing, like never done it before. Now we've got, a bunch of chickens that we have to process and put in our fridge. It wasn't easy, but when it was done, the confidence we had. And so the next year we doubled our number of birds. And last year we doubled it again. And we just placed an order. We got 60 birds coming in May. We raise our own meat birds. We have sovereignty around that. We've got our own garden. The first year our garden sucked ass. The second year all we had were tomatoes. Last year we got a variety. We even grew potatoes. The amount of pride and excitement we had from gaining that, was it easy? Hell no. I mean, I think I posted a video. I had just got home from Washington, D.C., and I had like 12 hours. Actually, it wasn't even 12 hours. I called my buddy who builds a moon phase calendar on like the old ways of how they farmed and when to plant on certain moon phases. And I was like, when does this phase end? Because he's like, you got to get the potatoes in before it ends. And I called him. He's like, you have until 5 p.m. today. And I'm like, no way. I'm like, shit. We went to work and I literally got the last potato planted by like 3:30. And I'm like, we made the calendar and we had a great harvest, especially for our first attempt. It was uncomfortable. It wasn't convenient. It required a lot of energy, a lot of effort, but the payoff. And do I have enough potatoes to last me the winter? Hell no, I ain't good. I just did it with my first year, but next year you better believe we're going to have twice the length of potato rows and know that we're going to have a lot more in our, crawl space, our basement, to feed ourselves through whatever the next winter brings.
Yeah, so, I mean, how's that feel as a husband and father?
Oh, dude, our role is to protect, provide, and preside. The providing side of knowing that, like, I didn't have, there's a different feeling from buying your family's food than from sitting down to a meal that you delivered that from start to finish. There's nothing that replaces that. The confidence, you've got girl dad hat. I got 3 daughters. So that pressure probably weighs even more, right? Because, there's some generational gender roles ideas in my head, but I want to provide for my children. I got, my girls are out there working with us, but as a dad of girls, to know, like, this is what we're doing. Also, as a dad of girls, what do you think they're going to be looking for in their relationships? Somebody that can provide the way dad provided. And that's probably more valuable for their long-term happiness than anything. The example that I'm setting. So.
Yeah. All right. So
salute.
I'm not starting a garden anytime. I mean,
I saw your attempt.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to garden when you're traveling 9 months of the year. But what's a good first, what do people do? They go, okay, AJ sounds crazy.
Yep.
He's over there cutting the heads off of 50 chickens. I've seen the photos.
Yeah.
I keep up with AJ. I think we talk at least a couple times a month. But okay, I'm in the suburbs. What do I do? What's my next step?
Chickens or quail?
Really? There's a quail dealer here in Austin. He does like it's a subscription based.
Really?
Yeah, you can buy a subscription, and if one die, because I guess there's some turnover.
Yeah.
I mean, he'll replace them. I don't know. Awesome. You pay a subscription, and he makes sure you always have quail.
Awesome. Yeah.
I'm a quail dealer here in town.
I say chicken or quail because some areas have restrictions on, chickens, and they can be noisy, and so you're going to get people narking on you. Quail are quiet as hell. What I say is do it anyway. Screw your neighbors, do it anyway and fight the fight. But if you're not up for that, quail are very small. You need more. The egg they produce is smaller, but they're super quiet and they produce eggs prevalently. So that'd be another way. If you want to get a little more solid in your food production on your own and you're in a small backyard, really, you could do this. Meat rabbits. 3 female rabbits don't make any noise. Nobody will ever know you got them, right? And again, like you started out saying, hey, you're crazy out there
selling my wife on putting cute little rabbits in the backyard so we can eat them.
I'm gonna save this clip for her.
I get it. Sell them as pet. Hey, sell them as pets until the store shelves are empty, and then you'll be able to provide.
There you go.
But check this out: 3 females and 1 male will produce 400 pounds of meat a year.
Wow!
Because they're breeding.
Yep, 3 females and 1 buck will produce 400 pounds of meat in a year. They're extremely quiet. I'm going to move to rabbits at some point here because they're way easier to process, and they taste like chicken. So why not?
But they don't have any fat on them.
Yep, you do have to make sure you supplement with fat for sure.
Did you hear about the rabbit famine?
Yeah, rabbit starvation. Yep.
Rabbit starvation. That's what it was.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're super
All
lean.
they had were rabbits, and then they didn't have any fat, and so they started.
Yep.
When was that? I remember reading about it, but
I can't remember what year that was, but it was bad.
Way back in the day.
Yeah, like early 1900s. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Say I'm not going to get rabbits. I mean, what's my next step to just say it? All I do is shop at Whole Foods right now.
Yep. Yeah. So if you're looking,
what's the next step? If I'm going to change one behavior, what's the next
one
step?
behavior, simple step is buy local, and I'll give you a couple ways you can do that. Everybody knows about farmers markets. Sometimes they're not very convenient, right? You may not be able to get there at the time that farmers market's over. So we built fromthefarm.org because a place didn't exist like this when we started. This, COVID hit. I'm seeing the wheels fall off. I'm trying to sell beef. The consumer doesn't know how to find me. Facebook's run by PETA, so they make me take down my beef ads, whatever. That happened. I always say if Facebook didn't
well, Zucker's put some meat on now. So
I know.
He's doing jiu-jitsu. He's probably,
maybe he'll change that. Depends on who's on the board.
Money's moving different directions now.
Yeah, exactly. But it's hard to find. I just ran a poll recently on 2 different Facebook groups in cities. Each one got over 100 comments, and the poll I asked was something around who's buying from your local farmers and ranchers, and if not, why. 90% of the comments, each one of those posts in each group had over 100 comments. 90% of them said, we don't know where to go. We don't know how to meet the farmer or rancher. So our food system has been segmented to where people just go to the grocery store. It's who's had the marketing dollars. It's who's had the leverage. Like there's a lot about this that's in the politics side that would be another hour conversation. So we set out to build what we see as like the Airbnb of local food. And we use Airbnb because what Airbnb did so brilliantly was create technology that allowed for a new industry to grow so rapidly because it allowed simple entry to make revenue. So I got a spare bedroom. I got a camper parked on the side of my house. I throw up an Airbnb because they built the software. They did the marketing. They've got whatever logistics are necessary. They handled that. So it made it really easy for me, the short-term rental person, to get into it. We're doing that with farming and ranching and any food production. So you go to fromthefarm.org, wherever you live. And when you sign up on From the Farm, it uses your zip code to get you to the closest farmers first. Now, we're still growing. We're a new operation trying to scale it. Many of our producers will ship right to your door. So you might find somebody one state over, but it'll show up right at your door. I have this thing that I've been trying to figure out how to put it out there. Good, better, best. Good is American born and raised beef at the grocery store. That's good. Better is a white label that's sourcing from the farmers and ranchers. Somebody like Good Rancher.
That's like a force of nature.
Yeah, force of nature, Good Rancher. That's better than good. Best is actually shaking the hand of the person that raised that animal. because now you're getting to ask them the questions that matter to you the most directly from the person who did it, but also you're ensuring that person is still there for you and your family next year because your resources are what keeps that person doing their job. And so
Dude,
that's what we're up to.
I'm all about it. We go to the farmers market every week. We it's a thing. You know, like
Yeah.
we just that's when we do our shopping, and then we have friends meet us there, and we hang out at the
Yeah.
farmers market with our friends. It's like an opportunity to see our friends during the day. We normally like hang out in the evenings,
Yep.
so it's like our one daytime activity with our friends, which is great. I remember one day, there's a new rancher, and I went and talked to him. This is years ago, and I started asking him about how they raise the animals, and he didn't, he's like, yeah, we got into like, I didn't like one of the answers he gave me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay, cool. I'm going to go to the other guy over here, cause I don't agree with that. And he got pissed.
Yep.
It was hilarious. And it was very interesting, but it's only happened once.
Mm-hmm.
And I've probably grilled like 100 of them, and everybody else is super nice. So don't let that story scare y'all.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
totally.
It's easy. Just
Yeah.
talk to them. And dude, I have farmers and ranchers I talk to, and they got like little recipe things. Like there's a Ukrainian woman who sells me my lamb, and she'll share with me the recipes. Oh, here's how I make my borscht. Great. And then we just like pick it up and then buy the rest of what we need for the borscht there at the farmer's market.
Yep.
Like it's so much fun. It's so much fun. And from the farm, like, look, I don't have kids.
Yep.
I don't need as much convenience. I can afford the time. So if you're from the farm sounds like the ideal spot. That seems like the easiest thing to do if it's going to show up at your doorstep.
Yeah. The approach we're trying to take is not from how do we create the next big business, Airbnb, so AJ can go buy a yacht. That's not none of what we're doing has any of that.
I want you to buy a yacht, AJ.
I wouldn't be mad at that.
Listen, man, if I bought a yacht and not a ranch, I fell asleep, like you said earlier.
Nah, man. You're gonna have like 2 or 3 ranches, and then the yacht, change it up.
A fishing yacht.
All of our producers, if our producers are crushing it and we're creating more farms, and then there's still room for me to have a yacht, then maybe. But what we're talking about here is looking at human psychology, human behavior, where the current state of our food system is, what got us here, because it has to be changed. And that's a massive undertaking. Our current state is convenience. So we have to build a system that implements convenience, because that's what people are used to now.
Yeah.
The other side of that is the education. People don't even know how to buy a half a beef anymore. You're going to spend an hour on the phone with a rancher going over cuts that come from an animal. Your grandparents or your great-grandparents, that was common knowledge. So one thing that I'm always trying to appeal to the consumer on and make sure they understand is, if you actually care about your health, so you're going to go direct, and you care about the long-term implications of what it does to our food system and even our food sovereignty, because that's what we're talking about, the right to go down the street and buy it from your neighbor, then you have to understand, people need to learn what that process looks like. It's not going to Walmart, looking in a case at a line of different cuts, and then just picking one out of, wrapped in cellophane and styrofoam and walking out the door. That's not how ranchers work. If you want to buy the best, you have to meet them halfway. You got to meet them where they're at, which means most of these guys can't afford to just sell you the steaks, because then they're left with a deep freezer clear full of ground beef that could be hard to move. So a lot of times you're going to buy it in assorted boxes, right? You buy a 10-pound box, it's going to have 5 pounds of ground, 2 pounds of steak, and 3 pounds of roast. Or you're going to buy the whole half or quarter animal, or you're going to buy an eighth. It's not very common that your small local family operation has a whole bunch of freezer space where they can just piecemeal it out to you. And think about you got to understand the lifestyle to produce your food. Nothing about that's comfortable. I just called a friend of mine that actually taught farming in he's a farmer, but he taught farming in Afghanistan. That was one of his deployments. I'm like, what? Yeah, I just called him this morning to check in. He goes, my milk barn burned down last night trying to find a place for these 5 cows to get milked. I'll call you later. These scenarios never end for these guys. So you're talking
not really
about
selling farming right now.
Yeah, no. Well, what I'm trying to get people to understand is when you have to do things a little bit more inconvenient to support your food system for sovereignty, you're going to have to do things a little different. Those guys are running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you want it to show up perfect like the grocery store, go back to the efficiency. You're not ready to come in and handle the others. That's just the fact. And people need to know that. Like, you are as much, consumers are as responsible, if not more responsible, for the food and the environmental impact of how our food is raised than the people producing it.
Yeah. Well, you're going to look really cool when you know all your cuts of beef.
Yes.
I mean, I hang out with friends and we're sitting around talking about it. It's like, oh, you know what's up. All right.
Yeah.
So if one of your motivations is that you're cool, learning all the cuts of beef and how to prep them.
Yeah.
I mean, it goes really far in my circle.
Yep. That's right. There's some bragging points there for sure. And if you know how to pick the right cut, you're going to press the heck out of them at a barbecue.
Absolutely.
I'm on a week. I smoke a brisket a week right now.
Oh, really?
I live in Texas.
Yeah.
I moved to Texas 5 years ago. So I'm like, or 4 years. Yeah, it's been 5 years now. I'm like, you know what? If I'm going to be a real Texan, if I'm going to stay living here, I got to learn how to smoke a brisket.
Better than Terry Black's?
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm crushing over here.
Bragging rights for sure. Heck yeah.
Right. Got to come through for dinner. Get some good brisket.
Yep.
Brisket tacos.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, man.
It just tastes better too.
I know.
It tastes so much better too. Like, it's just, it's not necessarily how it's sourced, but it's everything that goes into it. And as you've highlighted, efficiency does not equal sustainability. And while the sovereignty might take a little more effort, you have to increase your capacity, but there's more of the sustainability to it. And the best designer I think any of us have ever seen is Mother Nature itself. And as you mentioned, with that regenerative process, Mother Nature already knows what to do. We just need to get out of the way.
Yeah. And she'll do it quick too. Like what took us 100 years to destroy, she can rebound in 5 if you follow the practices. I've seen it. I got a good friend that his name's Alejandro Carrillo. He ranches in the Chihuahua Desert. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, look him up. He's got pictures of the fence line between his property and his neighbor's property. His neighbor property covered in mesquite, not covered, but has mesquite trees and complete bare soil.
Well, mesquite does really well in like arid environments, and it's just a really hard. I didn't know what mesquite was until I went hunting on a bunch of land that had a bunch of mesquite, and it was a chore. But
big thorns. Yeah.
Yeah.
His side of the property, he's been doing this rotational grazing for quite a few years now, teaches it all around the world. And his mesquite trees are dying because the native forage is choking them out. And you almost can't see bare soil on his property. He posted a picture. They were in like the longest drought they'd had in 10 years. They had like 4 inches of rain and that was it. And he's standing in forage that's shoulder high and his neighbor is bare. And then he's got a picture of the rain coming down over his ranch, almost right on the fence line, because of that the local water cycles, the evapotranspiration. It basically kind of pulls those clouds over that area. Got to drop some of my knowledge in there for Ted, so he knows I'm diverse. I'm well versed in these topics, but but it makes a difference, and it's huge. And that didn't take him 100 years to bring back. It literally took 5 to 6 years. And Mother Nature's like, hold my beer and watch this. And you're like, holy shit, what happened? I've seen rangeland in Africa, a video of a guy showing a spring literally just bubbling out of the ground that used to be a desert. And he goes, this just popped up this year. I mean, it's incredible. What I would tell people is if you're curious about this stuff, look up Alan Savory's TED Talk on YouTube, and it'll really do a good job in 20 minutes of like opening your mind to the value of regenerative agriculture.
I mean, to your point, in the fall, everyone goes nuts when I talk about corn sweat, because you'll feel like a 1 to 2 degree difference on the warmer side in the corn mazes because of evapotranspiration, the increased moisture in the air. So these microclimates, to your point, can change things. And when you mentioned that the change in 5 years, what does that mean on the bigger scale for folks who are changing their behavior, changing their habits, the consumer taking responsibility and the sovereignty over their food? How quickly, and I know this is arbitrary, you can't predict exactly, but how quickly could you see a change as we go from efficiency to regenerative of undoing what we did last 100 years?
I'm glad you asked that question because it popped in my head earlier, because I want to make sure people understand, like, this is where we're trying to get to. We have caused, in the greater picture of our food system, we're talking 20 years to fix. Now, so I've built a personal, not super close, but I built a relationship with the Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins. I've been able to go out to DC a couple of times this last year, bring farmers and ranchers that should be heard, that have been largely ignored for decades. They're the experts. So I just create the meeting, the topic she sends over, and then we go and have the conversation. The direction that this administration is heading is the right direction for agriculture. The pushback I hear from people is it's not enough, or it isn't the thing they're focused on. But what most of these folks don't understand is how effed our system has become. And you're not changing that overnight. I mean, think about it this way. It takes 2 years to grow a cow. It takes 5 to 6 years to regenerate land. It takes the regenerative land to increase the number of cows you can have on that land, right? So you're talking 6 years of intentional management a specific way before you can increase the number of livestock that can go on that land. Doesn't mean you're not finishing cows up to that point, but we're at such a deficit in so many areas. For example, we have like 2,900 slaughterhouses left in all of America. 30 slaughterhouses process on the conventional side. Somewhere between 30 and 40 slaughterhouses process 80% of the meat we consume. You're talking about the need to regenerate and rebuild local food systems to the scale that we can build small processing facilities throughout the country. We should have 20,000 slaughterhouses processing for their communities. So you're talking about that as an issue. Then you also add in there the logistics, supply chain logistics, moving product from the plant it was processed, or the whether it's beef or produce or whatever, and getting that to the location that it needs to go to meet the consumer. All of these systems have been, for 70 years, have been built going this direction. So our food system is a super tanker. You're not turning that thing overnight. So we are talking about a 15 to 20 year transformation. The good news is we'll see incremental benefits as we go down that road. I believe you'll notice in 5 years, oh man, this is so much better. And then in another 5, oh, that's so much better. And then, so we'll see incremental changes that are significant over the next 20 years. But to get us to a place of sovereignty, we're talking about 20 years to fix a 70-year decline.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's not all rainbows and unicorns, but people need to know the reality of where we at, because when you spend your money, you're voting for one system over another. That's the reality. Your food dollars decide where that's going. And Walmart currently gets 1 in 4 food dollars. 1 in every $4 spent on food goes to Walmart. Walmart just got into the beef industry. They bought a $300 million slaughterhouse in Nebraska. They're starting to get into cow-calf operations. They're starting to sell bull genetics. We no longer have the big 4. We've got the big 5, and Walmart's one of them. And they're going to come in doing what Walmart does and have you believe that they're all about, family and affordability and all that kind of stuff. It won't be good. So consumers, they've got the choice to make. And that might mean hard decisions, which is, I'm not going to buy the beer, just as an example, I'm going to put that beer money towards higher quality food. I'm not going to buy whatever those, all the subscriptions we have, Amazon Prime and Netflix and YouTube and you name it, go through your budget. How much of your budget is allocated towards feeding yourself well versus comfort, convenience, entertainment?
Got to make those conscious choices. Often,
yeah. I mean, we from the farm's taken on three of the most complicated challenges, which is marketing, logistics, and technology. So like our software to get it there. And I look at this as a whole, and I'm like, I ask myself, have people suffered enough to make the change? Like we saw a little bit during COVID, but the speed at which I saw people forget that their store shelves went empty, I'm like, oh shit, we did not suffer nearly hard enough. I just hope it doesn't take famine for people to actually be like, oh crap, because when famine happens, it's too late. You're gonna wean a whole bunch of the population, cull a bunch of the population before it comes back. So,
AJ serving the country abroad and domestic. We appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much, man. This has been fantastic. I don't know about you, Mike. I'm complete.
I am too. It's been fantastic. Thank you, AJ.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate you having me on.
No, absolutely. I'm going to recap some of the things you said, if you don't mind, just to share the gems. But I think the message here is the system might be efficient, but it is fragile. 3 days of supply on the shelves in the cities. I think you said like 48 hours worth. That doesn't seem like a good backstock to have. And the butterfly effect, the adjustments that we make can't really quantify the impacts or the shifts that's actually happening beyond where the adjustments are happening. And soil being fertilized or defertilized, we're taking the nutrients out of the soil, which then takes away the micronutrients out of the food that you're having. Because of the decentralized soil, 60 harvests remaining. AJ mentioned later in the episode, just recently, we could fix this in 20 or so years. We better get to work, guys. And then calories versus the micronutrients, as I mentioned. You might be getting the calories, but are you being supported with the micronutrients? And your supplementation, you can't out-supplement the bad diet. Regenerative versus the conventional approach. How are you getting your food? What is the process in which your food is going through? And it's not the cow, it's the how. When it comes to the carbon emissions and when it comes to the issues with climate, it's not the cow's fault, it's how we're going about this. And again, used to be 30%. I think you said 30% of our budget was spent on food, 8% on medical before the efficiency approach. And I imagine not only those numbers were flipped, but if you think the $13.99 that Mike is spending on tacos is expensive, just take a look at your medical bill. I'll leave that there. It only takes about 8 to 10% of the population to create change. I believe we have a big chunk of that 8 to 10% listening. So we have work to do, y'all. And then pick one thing until it becomes natural behavior. You don't eat the whole cow at once. You eat it one bite at a time, pun intended. So again, start small, work your way up. Food security is not the same as food sovereignty. Just because you have something to eat doesn't mean it's ideal, and it doesn't mean it's your choice. So food sovereignty is about not only having something to eat, but it's your right and the ability to choose what you want to eat and how you want to source it. And then sovereignty over the illusion of security. I appreciate the upgrade in that verbiage, Mike. It's the illusion of security where you give up that sovereignty. But when you are sovereign, you have that security within you. And then rabbits and quail for the suburbs out there. Those who are living in the suburbs, fill the backyard with rabbits and quail. Would you say a quarter of an acre is enough land for that? Asking for a friend. I'm just saying.
You're good.
I love it. And then good, better, best. Whatever level you're at, work on your way to shaking the hands with the person who's growing your food, who's looking after the livestock. And it's all about community. That's what we're talking about here. Consumers are responsible more than you think, if not more responsible for the direction in which we're going. So do us a favor, follow AJ, let him know you found him through the Full Stack podcast, and start taking those steps from good to better to best. and you can find a community to roll with by checking out the Full Stack community. We appreciate you guys. That's AJ, that's Mike, I'm Ted. Thanks for checking out the Full Stack episode.